I'm not here to be your wife. The woman's voice cracked against the wind. Ice crusted her hair. Her coat was soaked through to the skin. She gripped the iron gate with both hands like it was the only thing still holding her upright. I'm here because if you close this door, I will die out here tonight. Cole Mercer stared down at her from the top step. He didn't move. He didn't speak. Every other woman who'd ever come to Blackstone Ridge came for his money. This one came because she had nowhere else left to go. If this story already has you hooked, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. Now let's get into it. The blizzard came without warning. That was the thing about Montana in February, it didn't negotiate. 1 hour the sky was pale and flat, the kind of gray that sat low over the Rockies like a held breath. The next, the wind had teeth. Temperature dropped 20 degrees in less time than it took to saddle a horse. Snow came sideways. Roads disappeared. And anything caught outside without shelter was already in trouble. Cole Mercer knew all of this. He'd been ranching Blackstone Ridge for 12 years. He knew every warning sign, knew when to pull his men in early, when to check the outer fences, when to send the horses to the covered stable 2 hours before the sky cracked open. He ran 40,000 acres with the kind of cold precision most men applied to machinery, not land. Every system worked. Every man knew his role. Every decision was made before emotion had a chance to interfere. That was how Cole Mercer operated. That was how he survived. He was standing in the main hall when his foreman Hank knocked twice and stepped inside without waiting, which meant something was wrong. There's a woman at the front gate. Cole didn't look up from the ledger. Send her back. She came on foot, Cole. That made him pause. He set down his pen. In this weather. Her horse gave out a mile back, best I can figure. She's barely standing. Gate monitor shows her down on one knee already. Hank's voice was steady, but something underneath it wasn't. She's not going anywhere on her own. Not tonight. Cole closed the ledger. He didn't say anything for a long moment. He looked at the window at the white nothing pressing against the glass. He thought about the protocols he kept for a reason. No unannounced guests. No exceptions. 6 years of holding that line without wavering. Then he thought about the temperature outside. Bring her in, he said. Guest room east wing. Get Marta. Hank nodded and left. Cole didn't follow immediately. He stood there alone in the hallway of the house he'd built to hold a family in the silence he'd learned to call normal, and he told himself it was just weather. Just circumstance. Just the only decent human choice when another person would die otherwise. He told himself it meant nothing. She was soaked to the bone by the time Hank got the gate open. Her coat was a dark wool thing, good quality, once ruined now. Her boots were cracked at the sole. She had a single leather satchel strapped across her body and both arms wrapped around it like it held something she would not let go of under any condition. Her hair was dark, plastered flat against her face from the ice and wet. She was shaking so hard she could barely walk a straight line. But she walked. She didn't lean on Hank. He offered his arm and she shook her head once, sharp, quick, and kept moving under her own power. That was the first thing Cole noticed about her when she finally came through the front door. She was half frozen, and she still wouldn't accept help she hadn't asked for. Marta, the housekeeper, was already waiting with blankets and a look on her face that meant she had opinions about all of this and would be keeping them to herself. She wrapped the woman's shoulders and started steering her toward the east hall. The woman stopped walking. She turned and looked directly at Cole. Most people, when they came into Blackstone Ridge for the first time, looked at the house. At the ceilings, the stone fireplace, the scale of the place. Wealth had a way of pulling people's eyes before they thought about it. She looked at him. Thank you, she said. Her voice was rough from the cold. I know I'm not what you expected tonight. I didn't expect anything tonight, Cole said. Then I'll try not to take up more space than I have to. She let Marta lead her away. Cole stood where he was for a moment longer than he needed to. Her name was Evelyn Hart. Marta brought him that much over dinner. A dinner Cole ate alone as usual at the long table that seated 12 and always had. Evelyn had given her name clearly and politely, hadn't offered more, hadn't asked questions about the house or the ranch or him, had eaten the soup Marta brought without complaint, thanked her twice, and then sat quietly by the fire in the East Room with her satchel in her lap. "She holding that bag like it's got gold in it," Marta said, collecting his plate. "Or something she doesn't want anyone else to see." "You want me to ask?" "No," Cole said. "The storm should break by morning. She'll be on her way." Marta gave him the look she'd been perfecting for 9 years, the one that said she thought he was wrong, but wasn't going to argue tonight. She took the plate and left. Cole poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and did not drink it. He thought about protocols. About the 6 women in the last 3 years who'd shown up through various channels introduced by lawyers, by business partners, by a state senator who seemed to believe that the right marriage could solve every problem Cole didn't know he had. One of them had been beautiful. One of them had been sharp-minded, the kind of woman he might have genuinely admired in another life. He'd sent them all back, politely, clearly, without room for misinterpretation. He had no interest in what they were offering. He had no interest in what any of it cost. Clara Whitfield had taught him that lesson 6 years ago in the most permanent way possible, not by breaking his heart exactly, but by proving that the life he thought he was building had only ever existed in his own head. That was the part he couldn't forgive, not the leaving, the illusion, the years he'd spent constructing something real from material that was never solid. He didn't make that mistake twice. He drank the whiskey, went to bed, told himself the woman in the East Wing was a problem that would resolve itself by morning. She was still there at sunrise. Not because the storm hadn't broken, it had mostly leaving behind the particular silence of deep snow and cold, clear air. She was still there because Hank found her at 6 in the morning, standing in the barn doorway, watching 2 of the younger hands struggle with a fence repair that had come loose in the night wind. She was giving them instructions, Hank said when Cole found him in the yard. The foreman had a strange expression on his face. Not quite amusement, not quite surprise. Something between the two. Real specific ones. Showed them the load-bearing point on the post. Said she grew up on a working ranch, knew the technique. Cole looked toward the barn. They listened to her. Yep. Why? Because she was right, Hank said simply. Cole walked to the barn. She was inside now, running her hand along the neck of a gray mare that had been half wild since they'd taken her in the previous spring. The horse, which typically moved away from strangers with considerable speed and displeasure, was standing still. "That horse bites," Cole said from the doorway. Evelyn didn't startle. She turned her head slightly toward him like she'd already heard him coming. "She's not aggressive. She's afraid of sudden movement. There's a difference. She bit my top hand last October." "Did he move fast?" Cole said nothing. Evelyn turned back to the horse. "What do you call her?" "We don't name them." A pause. Short. She didn't editorialize it. "I'd like to ride out today and find my horse if that's possible. I don't think she went far. She's well trained." "The roads to Dillon Creek won't be passable before noon. Maybe later." "I'm not going to Dillon Creek." He hadn't expected that. "Where are you going?" She hesitated, the smallest fraction of a second so brief that most people would miss it. He didn't. "East," she said. "I was heading east." East from Dillon Creek in a February blizzard on a single horse. He kept his voice flat. "Without telling anyone where you were going." There wasn't anyone to tell. That landed differently than she probably meant it to. Or maybe exactly the way she meant it. He still couldn't tell. "You'll stay until the road's clear," he said. "After that, whatever you need." She looked at him directly again. Same as the night before, not looking at the ranch or the wealth behind it, just looking at him like he was a person she was trying to accurately read. "I'm not your responsibility," she said. "I'm aware of that. And I'm not—" She stopped, set her jaw slightly, started again. "I'm not staying out of gratitude. I'm staying because it's the practical choice and I'm a practical woman. I'll earn my keep while I'm here. You don't need to." "I know I don't need to," she said. "I want to. There's a difference." She said it the same way she'd said the thing about the horse, like she'd spent considerable time in her life being handed distinctions that mattered and watching people miss them anyway. Cole left her in the barn. He stood in the yard for a long moment afterward, facing the open white of Blackstone Ridge in winter, and tried to identify what it was that felt different this morning. He couldn't name it. That bothered him more than anything else. By the second day, the ranch hands had stopped looking at her like a stranger. This was unusual. Blackstone Ridge ran on a closed system. Cole had built it that way deliberately. His men were loyal because he paid fairly, treated them well, and didn't ask more than was reasonable. But they kept their distance from outsiders as a matter of ranch culture. It wasn't unfriendliness. It was just how the place operated. Evelyn Hart disrupted that within 48 hours, and she didn't do it through charm or conversation or any particular effort to make herself liked. She did it by being useful. On the second morning, she was up before anyone except Cole, and had started a batch of bread in Marta's kitchen, not because anyone asked, but because she'd found flour that needed using, and Marta's hands had been bothering her in the cold, which she'd mentioned once in passing, and which Evelyn had apparently filed and acted on without ceremony. When the older ranch hand, Davis, came inside for mid-morning coffee, there was fresh bread on the counter, and he stopped walking and just stared at it like it was something from another world. "She make that?" he asked Marta. "First thing this morning." Davis picked up a slice, chewed. "She's allowed to stay." Marta laughed. It was the first laugh Blackstone Ridge had heard in longer than Cole could immediately recall. He was passing the kitchen doorway when it happened. He stopped walking. Just for a moment. Then he kept going. On the third night, he found her at the dining table with her satchel open. She had papers spread across the surface, a lot of them. Legal papers from the look of the formatting. Letters. Documents with notary stamps and multiple signatures. Her hands were flat on the table on either side, and she was reading with the intensity of someone looking for something they were afraid they weren't going to find. She heard him come in and gathered the papers quickly, not frantically, but with practiced speed. The kind of speed that came from doing it before. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't think anyone used this room in the evenings." "They don't." Cole looked at the papers she was stacking. He didn't read them. "You can leave them out if you need to." "I'd rather not." "That's fine too." He poured himself a glass of water from the sideboard and sat down at the far end of the table, not close, not crowding her. She looked at him with that direct gaze again. Something working behind her eyes. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You can ask." "Why did you let me in the first night? You didn't know me. You have every reason to keep the gate shut. You were going to die. Other people have been in trouble at that gate before. I'm not naive enough to think I'm the first." That was a fair point. He thought about it honestly for a moment. Other people came to that gate with something they wanted from me. You came to that gate with nothing. Just your life. She was quiet for a moment. "That's more perceptive than I expected," she said. "People underestimate me. People underestimate me too," she said. And for the first time since she'd arrived, something in her face shifted. Not weakness, not sentiment, but a kind of recognition. The specific recognition of someone who has been misread their entire life, finally meeting someone else who knows what that feels like. Cole looked at the stack of papers under her hands. "Is someone trying to take something from you?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. "Why do you ask it that way?" "Because of how you're holding those papers." She looked down at her own hands as if she hadn't realized. Then she looked back up. "My husband died 8 months ago. His brother has been very industrious since then." "Does he have a name?" "Victor Hale." She said it with the specific flatness of someone who has already spent too much energy on anger and has reduced it deliberately to neutral fact. "He has lawyers. He has connections. He has documents that say things that aren't true, and witnesses who will swear to things that didn't happen." A pause. "And I have a satchel full of papers that prove he's wrong if I can just get them in front of the right person." "Where are you trying to get them?" She named a lawyer in Helena. A man Cole knew by reputation, Marcus Alcott. Honest, careful. Exactly the kind of man you'd want if the case was complicated. Alcott's a good choice, Cole said. She looked at him. You know him. We've done business. Something in her posture changed. Not relief exactly, but the slight loosening of someone who has been carrying full weight for a very long time, and has just been offered the smallest possible set-down. Then maybe my luck is changing, she said quietly. Cole looked at her across the long table. The firelight moved across the papers between them, across her hands, still pressed flat across the exhaustion in her face, that she was working hard not to show. Get some sleep, he said. The roads to Helena clear the day after tomorrow. She nodded. Began putting the papers back carefully one by one, organized in an order only she understood. Evelyn, he said. She looked up. Victor Hale. What does he want specifically? A beat. The papers in her hands still. The deed to my ranch in Wyoming, she said. A property my husband left to me directly in his own handwriting, witnessed twice. Victor claims the document is fraudulent. He's filed in 3 different courts. Her voice stayed level. He wants the land, and he wants me discredited enough that no one will believe me when I say why. Cole leaned forward slightly. How much land? 7,000 acres, she said. Good land, river access, 2 operational wells. He understood then, not just about the land, about the running, the satchel, the way she moved through Blackstone Ridge like someone who had learned not to get attached to a place because places could be taken. Go to sleep, he said again. We'll talk tomorrow. She looked at him one more time. You don't have to involve yourself, she said. I haven't decided that I am. But you're thinking about it. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he stood and walked to the doorway. Good night, Mrs. Hart. Behind him, he heard the soft sound of papers being pressed back into the satchel, the brass clasp clicking shut, and somewhere in the back of his mind, in the part that still remembered what it felt like to care about something other than silence and acreage and control something, shifted, quietly, almost without permission. The 4th morning, Cole did something he hadn't done in years. He asked Hank to keep the ranch running without him for a few hours, saddled his own horse, and rode the perimeter of the eastern field, not for any operational reason, but because he needed to think, and he thought better moving. He was 3 miles out when he found Evelyn's horse. She was standing in a shallow draw out of the wind-calm, eating snow. Well-trained, just like Evelyn had said. Cole took the lead rope off his saddle and walked the horse back quietly. He thought about the papers in the satchel. About Victor Hale and 3 courts and 7,000 acres of Wyoming land with river access. He thought about Marcus Alcott, who had once said to him over a bourbon in Helena, "The worst corruption isn't the dramatic kind, it's the slow kind, the kind that happens in courtrooms while good people run out of money and time." He thought about Clara Whitfield. He couldn't help it. She came into his mind the way she always did when he came close to trusting something again, like a warning his own memory had installed. She'd left him, not because he'd done anything wrong, but because Blackstone Ridge wasn't what she wanted, and she'd decided that 6 months too late, and said so from the doorway, with her bags already packed like she'd rehearsed it. I'm sorry, Cole. I thought I could want this. I couldn't. He'd believed for a long time afterward that the problem was him, that there was something in him that couldn't be chosen, not finally, not all the way. 6 years had not entirely resolved that question. He brought the horse back to the barn, found Evelyn in the yard, about to ask Hank whether anyone had seen the animal, and watched her face do something unguarded and immediate when she saw her horse coming through the gate. She walked to the horse and put both hands on the animal's face and leaned her forehead down. Quiet, not for show, just a woman and her horse, and a moment of relief too genuine to edit. Cole dismounted and handed her the lead rope without comment. She was in the east draw, he said. Evelyn straightened. Her eyes were slightly bright. She blinked it back. Thank you. She's well trained, he said. You were right. Evelyn looked at him for a moment. Cole. He'd heard his name hundreds of times. It always sounded like a short, functional word. The way she said it, not heavy, not weighted with anything except straightforward address, was different in a way he could not immediately explain, and did not particularly want to examine. "I'll find another way to Helena," she said. "I don't need to stay past today." He looked at her, at the horse, at the satchel on her shoulder, always there, always that small constant weight. "Alcott's in court until Thursday," he said. "I know his schedule. You go tomorrow, you'll wait 2 days before you get in front of him." He paused. "Stay until Friday morning. I'll send word ahead that you're coming." Her eyes searched his face, looking for the angle, looking for what this cost, what he wanted back, what the arrangement was. There wasn't one. "Why?" she asked. He thought about the honest answer for a moment. "Because you fixed Davis's fence post," he said. "And you made bread when Marta's hands were hurting. And you know the difference between a horse that bites and a horse that's afraid." He met her eyes. "And because you showed up at my gate with nothing but your life and the truth, and I have some experience with how much that costs." She was quiet for a long moment. "All right," she said. "Friday." She led her horse into the barn. Cole stood in the yard alone with the cold and the wide white Montana sky, and the quiet that was for the first time in longer than he could account for a different kind of quiet than the one he'd been living in. Not empty, just still. That evening Hank found him in the office and stood in the doorway with his hat in both hands, which was always a sign. "Victor Hale sent a man," Hank said, "asking at the Dillon Creek Inn about a woman traveling alone, showing a photograph." Cole set down his pen. "What kind of man?" "Lawyer type, young, city boots." Hank paused. He asked the innkeeper if any strangers had passed through during the storm, mentioned Blackstone Ridge by name. The room was very quiet for a moment. He got anything. "Tom at the inn's not the sharing type," Hank said. "But it won't take long. Storm threw enough people off their routes that someone will have seen something." Cole looked at the wall. At the maps, their contour lines, property boundaries, the exact shape of 40,000 acres he had spent 12 years building into something that could not be shaken. "Don't tell her tonight," Cole said. "She should know. She should sleep. She hasn't slept properly since she got here." He looked at Hank. "Tell her in the morning. I'll be there when you do." Hank turned his hat brim once in his hands, a habit when he was choosing words carefully. "Cole, this Victor Hale, if he's the kind of man who sends people ahead of himself in a blizzard, he's not going to stop at the county line." "I know." "Then you know this isn't going to stay quiet." "I know that too." "And you're still—" "Get some sleep, Hank." The foreman studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly and left. Cole sat alone in the office with the maps on the wall and the ledger open on the desk, and the particular silence of a man who has just made a decision he hasn't said out loud yet. He thought about protocols, about walls, about the 6 years he'd spent building a life that was inviolable, untouchable, completely under his own control. He thought about a woman who showed up at his gate with nothing but her life and the truth. He picked up his pen and began writing a letter to Marcus Alcott in Helena, not asking for an appointment, requesting an urgent consultation. Evelyn found out about Victor's man the next morning, before Cole had a chance to tell her. She came into the kitchen while Marta was setting out breakfast, and she had already read it in the room, the way Hank stood slightly too still near the window, the way Marta moved with quiet efficiency instead of her usual unhurried pace, the way Cole was already seated at the table at an hour he was normally out in the yard. She set her satchel on the chair beside her and sat down. "Tell me," she said. Cole looked at Hank. Hank looked at his coffee. Cole looked back at Evelyn. Victor sent someone ahead, a lawyer most likely, asking at the Dillon Creek Inn about a woman traveling alone during the storm. He mentioned Blackstone Ridge by name. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She picked up her coffee with both hands and held it, and said nothing for a moment that was long enough to tell Cole she was not surprised, only recalibrating. "How long do I have?" she asked. "Before Victor knows you're here could be hours, could be already. Then I need to leave today, not Friday." "Alcott's in court," I'll wait in Helena. I've waited in worse places. She set the cup down. I will not bring this to your door, Cole. That is not something I'm willing to do. You didn't bring anything, he said. The storm brought you. That's a generous interpretation, and you know it. She met his eyes directly. Victor Hale is not a man you want sitting across a table from you. He has resources. He has lawyers on retainer in 4 states. He has a sitting state senator in his pocket, Whitmore out of Billings, and he is the kind of man who does not accept no as a final answer from anyone. A pause. I've spent 8 months running from him. I know exactly what he does to people who get in his way. What does he do? Cole asked. He buries them, she said simply. Legally, financially, reputationally. He doesn't need to do anything illegal. He just needs to make it expensive enough and slow enough that people run out of money or patience before the truth comes out. She looked at the table. My husband's estate attorney quit after Victor's people contacted the Bar Association with a complaint. The complaint was baseless. It was dismissed 3 months later. But 3 months was long enough that I lost my legal representation at the worst possible time. The kitchen was very quiet. Marta had stopped moving. Hank had turned from the window. That's how he operates. Evelyn continued, her voice still level, still that carefully maintained neutral that Cole was beginning to understand was not coldness, but the specific discipline of a person who cannot afford to come apart. Attrition. He waits for you to run out of options, and then he offers you one. His. You sign something that looks like a settlement, and you walk away with enough money to disappear quietly, and he gets the land. And you haven't taken it, Cole said. I haven't taken it. Why not? You could have settled 8 months ago. You'd have money. You'd be safe. She looked at him. Because my husband spent 30 years building that ranch. He grew up poor in a town that didn't believe he'd amount to anything, and he spent his whole life proving them wrong. He left it to me because he wanted it kept, not sold, not stripped, not handed over to his brother, who never respected a single acre of it. Her jaw was set. I don't get to trade that for comfort. Not while I can still fight. Cole looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Hank. Cancel the Friday plan, he said. We're going to Helena today. Evelyn started to speak. He held up one hand not sharply, but with finality. I'm not doing this because you need rescuing, he said. I'm doing it because I know Alcott, and I know Whitmore, and I know exactly what Victor Hale's strategy looks like, because I've watched men like him operate in this state for 20 years. You have the documents. You have the facts. What you need is someone at that table who isn't afraid of the names being thrown around. He picked up his coffee. That's not charity, Mrs. Hart. That's a strategic decision. She studied him for the long time. You're going to make this complicated, she said. Things are already complicated. I'm going to make them manageable. A beat of silence. All right, she said. Hank exhaled quietly by the window. Marta started moving again. And Cole, for the first time in a very long time, felt something that was not entirely about the ranch or the land or the work. He pushed the feeling aside and told himself it was irrelevant. He was very good at telling himself that. He was becoming slightly less good at believing it. They rode to Helena in Cole's covered wagon. He'd have taken the motor car, but the road was still half ice, and a wagon handled the drifts better. Hank drove. Cole and Evelyn sat on opposite sides of the interior, her satchel between her hands, the landscape moving past. She read through her documents the entire way. Not performing it, not trying to look prepared, she was actually working, actually going through the papers in a specific order, pulling some setting, others aside, building something she needed. Cole watched her without watching her. He looked at the window. He looked at his own hands. He thought about Alcott and what he needed to say before they arrived. The deed, he said after a long stretch of silence. The one Victor's calling fraudulent. Where was it executed? Cheyenne, in front of Judge Harrow and a notary named Pelton. Both witnesses signed. She pulled a specific paper from the stack and handed it across without looking up. Third paragraph. He read it. Careful formal language. His late husband's handwriting was clear and steady in the signature line. 2 witness signatures below, both clear. The notary stamp was clean and sharp. "This is solid," Cole said. "I know it's solid." "Then Victor's claim needs something to stand on. He either has a counter-document or he's attacking the witnesses." "Both," she said. "He produced a second deed allegedly executed 6 weeks before this one, naming himself as sole heir to all properties. He claims my husband signed it under duress and that the Cheyenne deed is forged." She paused. "And he has 2 affidavits from men who claim they were present when my husband told his brother he'd changed his mind about the will. Do those men exist? They exist. Whether they're telling the truth is a different question." She finally looked up at him. "One of them worked for Victor for 3 years before my husband died. I have his employment records." Cole handed the deed back. "You've done this before." "Done what?" "Built a case. Organized evidence. Thought through the arguments before you got to the table." She tucked the deed back carefully. "My father was a lawyer, not a rich one. The kind who worked out of a one-room office in a small town and charged people what they could afford." A short pause. "He used to let me sit in his office after school when he was preparing cases. Said it helped him think having someone else in the room." Something moved in her face. "He died when I was 19. I've been organizing evidence in my head ever since." Cole was quiet. "He would have hated Victor Hale," she added. There was the faintest trace of something near a smile, dry, brief, genuine. "He had a particular dislike for men who used legal machinery to hurt people who couldn't afford to fight back." "So do I," Cole said. She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "I noticed that." The wagon hit a rut and steadied. Outside, the Montana sky was doing what it always did after a major storm, showing off wide and sharp, and so blue it was almost aggressive. Neither of them commented on it. After a moment, Evelyn said quietly, "Can I ask you something else?" "You can ask." "The house at Blackstone Ridge. It's built for a family." He said nothing. "The dining table seats 12, she continued. "The east wing has 3 furnished rooms that nobody uses. There's a nursery at the end of the upper hall, the door's closed, but I saw the handle was a different design from the others. Child height." She paused. "You built it for people who never came." It wasn't a question. Cole looked at the window for a long moment. "Her name was Clara," he said. "That's all you need." Evelyn didn't push, didn't offer sympathy, didn't fill the silence with anything he hadn't asked for. "All right," she said, and went back to her papers. Cole sat with the name in the air between them. Clara, just the word, and realized that in 6 years he had not said it out loud to another person. Not once. Not to Hank. Not to Marta. Not to anyone. He'd said it just now like it was a minor fact. It didn't feel minor. But it didn't feel the way it used to either. Marta. Alcott's office was on the 3rd floor of a building on the main street of Helena, and Marcus Alcott himself was a lean man in his late 50s, with reading glasses permanently on his forehead, and the unhurried manner of someone who had stopped being impressed by pressure a long time ago. He shook Cole's hand and looked at Evelyn with the sharp, neutral assessment of a man who needed to know quickly whether a client was telling the truth. "You have the documents," he said. "All of them," Evelyn said. "Then sit down and start at the beginning. I want the full timeline. Don't edit for efficiency. I need every detail, even the ones you think don't matter." She sat down and started at the beginning. Cole sat off to one side and listened. He already knew the broad strokes. What he hadn't known, what came out in that office over the next 2 hours, laid out with the precision and completeness of someone who had been rehearsing this account since before she'd had a lawyer to say it to, was the full shape of what Victor Hale had actually done. It was worse than she'd described in the kitchen. Victor had not just filed in 3 courts. He had filed in 3 courts sequentially, each filing designed to create a paper trail that would make the previous one seem more legitimate. He had filed complaints against 2 of Evelyn's potential legal representatives, one dismissed, one still pending. He had used Senator Whitmore's office to delay the Cheyenne court's review of the competing deed by routing it through a procedural challenge that had no legal merit but took 4 months to resolve. He had hired men to follow Evelyn from Wyoming into Colorado, then into Idaho, then north into Montana. He had paid witnesses. He had manufactured documents, not crude forgeries, but careful, expensive constructions that would hold up to casual review and require expert testimony to dismantle. And he had done all of this while publicly characterizing Evelyn Hart as a grieving widow with unstable mental health who was being taken advantage of by unnamed opportunists. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Alcott had not written anything down. He sat with his hands flat on the desk and his glasses still on his forehead and looked at the pile of organized documents Evelyn had laid out with the expression of a man who was doing serious rapid calculation. "This is a coordinated strategy," he said. "Not one man. There's a firm behind this. Probably Randall and Cross out of Denver. They specialize in estate litigation for high-net-worth clients who want results without fingerprints." "Can we beat it?" Cole asked. Alcott looked at him, then at Evelyn. "The employment records for the affidavit witness the man who worked for Victor. 3 years of payroll ledgers," Evelyn said. "His signature on quarterly reports that Victor signed above him. And the original deed, is this the only copy?" "No, my husband filed a copy with the Cheyenne County Recorder's Office the same day." "Separate transaction. Different clerk." She pulled another paper from the satchel. "Receipt of filing." Alcott took the receipt, looked at it for a long time. "Victor either doesn't know about the county copy," he said, "or he hasn't been able to get to it yet." "He doesn't know," Evelyn said. "My husband didn't tell him. He didn't trust Victor even then. He told me about the copy 2 days before he died. It was the last practical thing he ever said to me." The room held that for a moment. Alcott set the receipt down. "I need a week to review everything and prepare a full response. I'll file a motion to consolidate the 3 court cases into one jurisdiction. His strategy depends on them staying fragmented. Consolidated, his paper trail starts to contradict itself." He looked at Cole. "The political side is yours. Whitmore's involvement needs to be neutralized before we go to court, or he'll keep using procedural mechanisms to delay." "I'll handle Whitmore," Cole said. Evelyn looked at him. Something in her eyes, not quite alarm, but close to it. "Cole, I know Whitmore. We have history." He held her gaze. "The kind of history where he knows I'm not someone he can afford to have on the wrong side of a public dispute. He's not going to back down because you ask him to." "I'm not going to ask him," Cole said. "I'm going to remind him of something he'd rather not have reminded. That's different." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then carefully, "What does he owe you?" "Nothing. But I know what he doesn't want known. That's worth more than a debt." She held his gaze for 2 long seconds. "Be careful with that kind of leverage. Men like Whitmore don't feel cornered gracefully." "I know," Cole said. "That's why I'll do it in a room with a witness." Alcott almost smiled. It was the restrained expression of a man who appreciated a well-considered move. "I'll need your formal authorization to begin," he said to Evelyn. "And I'll need to know where you'll be staying while this proceeds. Victor's people are in the state. You can't stay in a hotel in Helena. You'll be found and served with something before the week is out." Evelyn looked at the desk, not at Cole. Cole looked at her. "She's staying at Blackstone Ridge," he said. Evelyn looked up at him then. "Until this is resolved," Cole added. "Victor can send his lawyers, he can send his witnesses, he can send the senator. Let them come to 40,000 acres with Hank at the gate and my name on the property line and explain to me what business they have on my land." Alcott said nothing. He picked up his pen and wrote something. Evelyn said nothing. She looked at Cole with an expression that was harder to name than any she'd shown him before. Not gratitude, she didn't do gratitude like that. Not relief. Something more complicated. The specific expression of a person who has been fighting alone for so long that the sudden presence of someone beside them is disorienting in a way that has nothing to do with weakness. "You understand what you're doing," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "I understand exactly what I'm doing," he said. "Victor will make it personal. He'll come after the ranch, after your contracts, your reputation. He doesn't fight clean." "Mrs. Hart." Cole leaned forward slightly. "I have 40,000 acres, 12 years of clean accounts, and not one enemy in this state who has anything true on me. Whatever Victor Hale wants to make personal, he is welcome to try." A pause. "I've been waiting for something worth fighting for longer than I'd like to admit. I'm not going to pretend otherwise." The room went very still. Alcott wrote something else, turned a page. Evelyn looked at Cole for a long moment. Her hands were on the satchel. Her face was doing something careful and controlled, and underneath all that control, something was shifting. "All right," she said, very quietly. Blackstone Ridge. The ride back was quieter than the ride in. Not uncomfortable, just the specific quiet of two people who have said something real and are letting it settle without pulling at it. Halfway back, Evelyn said without looking up from the window, "You said you've been waiting for something worth fighting for." "I did." "Did you mean the case?" He thought about it honestly. The flat white land moving past, the horse's steady pace, the satchel on her lap. "I meant it the way I said it," he said. She turned to look at him. He met her eyes, and neither of them said anything else for the rest of the road home. They arrived back at Blackstone Ridge in late afternoon. Hank met them in the yard with the look he reserved for news that needed delivering fast. "Two riders came while you were out," he said. "Left a letter." Cole took it, broke the seal, read it. He looked at Hank. "Victor's in Montana," he said. Evelyn went very still beside him. "He's not in Dillon Creek," Cole continued reading. "He's in Billings, at Whitmore's office." He folded the letter. "He wasn't following you north. He was already here." Evelyn's face was a controlled surface over something moving hard underneath. "He knew," she said. "He knew I was heading this direction. He didn't send a man ahead to find me. He sent a man ahead to confirm I'd arrived." Her voice was very steady. "He's been ahead of me the whole time." "Not anymore," Cole said. He put the letter in his coat pocket and walked toward the house. Behind him, Evelyn stood in the yard for one moment alone, the satchel strapped tight across her chest, the cold hitting her face, and something in her eyes that was not fear. It was the look of a woman who has finally stopped running and decided to stand. Victor Hale arrived at Blackstone Ridge on a Tuesday morning, and he did not come alone. He came with two lawyers, a man Cole recognized as one of Whitmore's personal aides, and a fourth man who carried a leather briefcase and said nothing and looked at everything. The kind of man you hired not for legal work, but for documentation. For building a record of whatever happened next. Hank sent word to the house the moment the carriage came through the outer gate. Cole was already in the front hall when they knocked. He'd been expecting this since the letter 2 days ago. He'd spent those 2 days making calls, writing letters, and having two specific conversations, one with Alcott in Helena, one with a man named Greer in Billings, who had worked counterfraud for the state for 11 years and owed Cole a professional favor. He opened the door before the second knock. Victor Hale was younger than Cole had constructed him in his mind. Late 40s. Well-dressed in the specific way of men who learned wealth later in life and still wore it slightly too carefully. His face was controlled and pleasant in the manner of someone who had practiced pleasant for so long it had become indistinguishable from his real expression. He smiled when Cole opened the door. "Mr. Mercer," Victor said, "I appreciate you receiving us. I'm Victor Hale. I believe we have a matter in common." "I know who you are," Cole said. "What do you want?" The pleasant expression didn't change. "I'm trying to locate my sister-in-law, Evelyn Hart. She's been traveling alone, and I have reason to believe she may be in some distress. We've been concerned for her well-being." "Have you?" "Very much so. After my brother's death, she's had some difficulty, understandably, and we want to make sure she's receiving the support she needs." He paused. Someone matching her description was reported near your property during last week's storm. I wanted to follow up personally." Cole looked at Victor for a long moment. At the lawyers behind him. At the aide from Whitmore's office. At the quiet man with the briefcase. "She's here," Cole said. Victor's expression did something small and careful. A flash of satisfaction suppressed immediately behind renewed concern. "I'm glad she's safe. I'd very much like to speak with her." "She doesn't want to speak with you. Mr. Mercer, she's a grieving woman in a vulnerable state. She's a property owner in the middle of a legal dispute," Cole said. "And she's represented by counsel. If you have something to say to Evelyn Hart, you say it through Marcus Alcott and Helena." He held Victor's eyes. "You know Alcott's name. I can see that you do." The pleasant expression held, but something under it changed. "I'm simply here as family. You're here as the opposing party in a fraudulent deed claim that is going to look considerably less solid once Alcott consolidates your 3 filings into one jurisdiction." Cole kept his voice level and even. "That's a legal assessment, not a personal one. Take it back to whoever prepared your strategy and ask them what consolidation does to the timeline you've built." One of the lawyers behind Victor moved almost imperceptibly. The man with the briefcase was watching Cole with careful attention. Victor smiled. It was a different kind of smile now. Not warm, not performed, but real. The first real thing he'd shown since the door opened. "You've involved yourself in something you don't fully understand, Mr. Mercer." "Then explain it to me." "Evelyn is not well. She has constructed a version of events around my brother's death that is, I say this with genuine sympathy, not accurate. She is in possession of documents she has misrepresented to whatever counsel she's found, and she is going to be deeply embarrassed when the full picture becomes clear." He paused. "I would hate for your involvement and your reputation to become collateral damage in that process." "Is that a warning?" "It's a concern." "For my reputation and your business interests," Victor said. "Senator Whitmore has significant influence over several of the grazing contracts that I understand run through your eastern acreage, federal adjacent leases, the kind of arrangement that requires ongoing goodwill from the right offices." He let that sit for exactly 1 second. Goodwill that could become complicated if it appeared you were harboring someone involved in an active legal dispute against a party with standing connections. The yard was very quiet. Cole heard Hank shift his weight behind him off to the left. He did not look away from Victor. "Let me be clear," Cole said. "Evelyn Hart is a guest on my property under my protection. If you or anyone connected to you approaches her without her counsel present, I will have your people removed from my land by whatever means are necessary and file a harassment complaint with the Billings Court before sundown. If Senator Whitmore's office interferes with any of my federal grazing contracts, I will present the correspondence I already have documenting that interference to every journalist in Helena before the week is out." He paused. "And if you come back to this gate without a court order signed by a judge, I can verify I will not open it." Victor looked at him. The pleasant expression was entirely gone. What was underneath it was not anger, it was calculation. The cold, patient calculation of a man deciding whether the obstacle in front of him needed to be moved or removed. "You're making a mistake," Victor said quietly. "I've made mistakes before," Cole said. "Letting you stand on my porch longer than necessary is shaping up to be one of them." He looked past Victor to the carriage. "Have a safe ride back to Billings." He closed the door. He stood in the hallway with his hand still on the door and listened to the sound of feet on the porch steps, carriage wheels turning, horses moving. Hank came inside 30 seconds later. "That went well," Hank said. "That was the opening move," Cole said. "He came here to read me. Now he has. And now he knows I'm not going to step aside." Cole walked toward the office. "Which means the next move is going to be harder than a polite conversation on the porch." Evelyn had been in the upstairs hall. She'd heard every word. She came down when the carriage was gone and found Cole in the office with a pen in his hand and 3 letters already drafted on the desk. She stood in the doorway and looked at him with something he was learning to recognize, the specific expression she wore when she was revising her understanding of a situation and didn't want to show how quickly she was doing it. You knew about the grazing contracts, she said. I knew he'd go there eventually. Whitmore's been using that particular leverage on ranchers in this region for 4 years. It's his standard play. And the journalists in Helena? 2 of them already have packets from Alcott. Background material. Nothing publishable yet, but enough that when the time comes, they have context. He looked up. I've been busy since we got back from Helena. She stepped into the office. She looked at the letters on his desk and didn't reach for them, respecting the line as she always did. Cole, he's going to come after the ranch directly. What he said about the contracts, that wasn't a bluff. I know. Whitmore can slow walk those lease renewals for 2 years if he wants to. That's real money, real operational damage. She was looking at him steadily, not trying to scare him, but making sure he understood. I came here with 1 satchel and nothing to lose. You have 40,000 acres. I have 40,000 acres and a clean record and more patience than Victor Hale has ever had to deal with in one person. He set down the pen. He wins by attrition. He drains people until they quit. That only works if you can be drained. He held her eyes. I can't. She looked at him for a long moment. Why are you doing this? We've had this conversation. We've had a version of it. I want the real answer. He considered giving her the practical answer again. Strategic decision, mutual interest, he knew the players. All of it was true. None of it was complete. Because what's happening to you is wrong, he said, and I'm in a position to do something about it. And I have spent 6 years on this ranch doing nothing except running it and running it well and telling myself that was enough. He paused. It's not enough. It was never enough. I just didn't have a reason to admit it until now. The office was quiet. Evelyn looked at the desk, at the letters, at the maps on the wall with the property lines marked in Cole's careful hand. My husband used to say that the most dangerous thing a person can do is care about something that can be taken, she said. He said it like a warning. I think he said it because he was afraid. A beat. He was a good man, but he spent his whole life protecting himself from loss by never fully committing to anything, including me sometimes. She looked up. I don't want to be the reason you become that. Cole looked at her. You won't be, he said. She held his gaze, and for one moment, just one, she let him see all of it. The exhaustion, the 8 months of running, the grief underneath the discipline, genuine and old and heavy. And underneath even that, something that was not hope exactly, but was in the same neighborhood. Then she looked away. What do you need me to do? Alcott needs one more document. The original payroll ledger, the physical one, not the copy. Do you have it in the satchel? Yes. Can you be in Helena by Thursday? Yes. Then we go Thursday. He picked up his pen. And in the meantime, don't go outside the main yard alone. I know that's not something you want to hear. It's something I can accept, she said. For now. He nodded. She turned to leave. Evelyn. She stopped. What you said about your husband. About never fully committing. He chose his words carefully. That's not a condition I share. She stood in the doorway with her back to him for one long second. I know, she said, and left. The first newspaper piece came out on Wednesday. Not a major paper. A Billings weekly with a history of printing whatever Senator Whitmore's office needed printed. The headline was careful, not defamatory on its face, just pointed. Questions surround Wyoming widow's Montana travels. 3 paragraphs about an unnamed woman involved in a probate dispute, reportedly seeking outside influence to contest a legitimate estate settlement. No names used. But enough detail, a Montana ranch, a blizzard, a wealthy landowner, that anyone in the region who was paying attention knew exactly who was being discussed. Hank brought the paper in at breakfast and set it on the table without comment. Cole read it, passed it to Evelyn. She read it with the same flat expression she used for everything Victor related. Set it down. He's faster than I expected, she said. He moved up his timeline, Cole said. He came here expecting to get you out quietly. When that didn't work, he switched to the public play. He's trying to control the story before Alcott files. Yes, She pressed her fingers flat against the newspaper. If he gets the narrative established before we can rebut it, it won't matter what Alcott presents. People will read the facts through the story they already believe. Which is why we're not going to let him establish it. She looked at him. What are you going to do? I'm going to give Helena's two main papers something more interesting than a Billings Weekly's vague insinuations. He pushed back from the table. Davis, get my coat. Cole, Evelyn started. The story he's telling is anonymous, Cole said. Mine won't be. There is a significant difference between a nameless rumor and Cole Mercer of Blackstone Ridge stating on the record that he knows exactly what Victor Hale is doing and why. He looked at her. Reputations are only as powerful as the silence around them. Victor is counting on mine. She looked at him for a long moment. If you do this publicly, it's not just a legal case anymore. It becomes personal. He will not forgive it. I know. He'll come after things that matter to you, not just contracts, the ranch hands, your suppliers, people who work for you. Then I'll deal with that when it comes. He picked up his coat. I have been quiet in this state for 6 years because quiet worked. It kept the ranch running. It kept the peace. It also let men like Victor and Whitmore operate without anyone with resources and reputation willing to stand against them. His voice was very even. I'm done being quiet. She looked at him with the expression that had no name, the one that was past surprise and past gratitude, and into something else, something that was starting to take up real space between them. Be careful, she said. Always, he said, and walked out. Miad. What Cole said to the Helena Courier and the Montana Register that Wednesday afternoon was measured specific and completely devastating to the narrative Victor had tried to build. He did not call Victor Hale a criminal. He did not make claims he couldn't substantiate. He said clearly and on the record, a woman with legitimate documented claim to property in Wyoming was being subjected to coordinated legal harassment by a party with connections to Senator Whitmore's office. He said he had reviewed her documents personally. He said Alcott was her counsel and had been retained. He said Blackstone Ridge stood behind her account. He said his name. He said the ranch's name. He said it twice. By Thursday morning, both papers had run short items. Not front page, not yet, but in print on record with Cole Mercer's name attached. Victor's anonymous narrative had just acquired a very public opponent. Hank rode in from Dillon Creek with the papers and found Cole and Evelyn already at the table. He laid both papers down and stood back. Evelyn read them. Her face was unreadable. She read both pieces twice. He's going to respond, she said. Yes. He's going to respond to you specifically. Make it about you. Let him. She looked up. Cole, if he shifts the target to Blackstone Ridge to your business, your name, the story becomes about you. Not about the deed. Not about the fraud. About you. She was not panicking. She was thinking fast and being honest about what she saw. That's what he wants. He wants to pull you into the fight so he can paint you as the outside influence trying to manipulate a vulnerable widow. Cole said nothing for a moment. He'd considered this. Then we have to get to the court first, he said, before he resets the narrative. Alcott files by Friday. What does he need? The ledger. I have it. And a signed statement from me about Victor's approach at the Cheyenne Inn. He offered me a settlement 3 weeks after my husband died before probate was even opened. I have the letter he sent. That letter shows premeditation, Cole said. He was positioning before the body was cold. Yes? Her voice stayed level. He knew what he wanted before the funeral. The words sat in the room for a moment. Marta came in with coffee, looked at both their faces, set the cups down quietly, and left. Tell me something, Cole said. The settlement he offered. How much? $80,000. Cole was quiet. The land is worth 4 times that on the low end, Evelyn said. He offered me enough to feel significant and not enough to feel fair. The number was designed to feel like generosity and actually be an insult. She picked up her coffee. I knew the moment I read the letter that he'd done the valuation himself, and chosen a number he thought would make me feel taken care of while he kept the real value. You didn't take it. I told you why. I know why. I wanted to hear it again. He looked at her. Because it's the reason everything else holds together. You could have walked away. You chose not to. That choice is the spine of the whole case. She looked at him with an expression that was almost startled, like the thing he'd just said had hit a place she hadn't expected anything to reach. Alcott said something similar, she said quietly. Alcott's smart. So are you. She set her cup down. You're smarter than people expect. People underestimate me, he said. You told me that before, she said. And this time there was something there. Warm, briefly unguarded. A small, real smile that didn't perform anything and didn't ask for anything back. Cole felt it land somewhere it shouldn't have. Somewhere that had been sealed off for 6 years. He looked at the papers on the table. We leave for Helena in an hour. They didn't make it to Helena. They were 20 minutes out from the ranch when Hank, riding alongside, pulled up hard and said there was a rider coming fast from the east. Cole told him to stop the wagon. The rider was young, 17, maybe 18. One of the hands from the Calloway Ranch, 3 miles over. He pulled up breathless and red-faced from the cold. Mr. Mercer, he said, gasping. Mr. Calloway sent me. There's a man at his place layware type with a court paper. Says it's an injunction. Says you're named in it. Cole went very still. What kind of injunction? Mr. Calloway said the paper claims you're holding a woman against her will. Says Victor Hale filed it this morning in Billings. The boy swallowed. There's a county sheriff's deputy riding out from Dillon Creek to serve it. Mr. Calloway said you'd want to know before he got there. The wagon was silent. Cole turned and looked at Evelyn. She had gone very pale, not with fear, with something colder and more controlled than fear, the specific color of a person watching a chess move they should have seen coming. He's not coming after the deed, she said. He's coming after me. He's going to claim I'm incompetent, that I need to be placed under his guardianship to protect the estate. Her voice was completely steady. This was always the second plan. If he couldn't get the land through the courts, he gets it by controlling me. He cannot file for guardianship without medical testimony. He has a doctor, she said. He'll have had one ready for months, a man who will say whatever Victor needs said. She looked at Cole. I told you he was ahead of me. Cole turned to the Calloway boy. Ride back to your employer and thank him. Tell him I'll settle the favor directly. The boy wheeled his horse and went. Cole looked at Hank. How far out is the deputy? Hour, maybe less. Cole thought for 4 seconds. Exactly 4. Then he said, turn around. Back to the ranch. Now. Hank turned the wagon. Evelyn said nothing. She was holding the satchel in her lap with both hands and looking at nothing in particular with the look of someone doing extremely fast mathematics behind very controlled eyes. He needs me served with that paper before Alcott files, she said. If I'm under a guardianship petition, I lose legal standing to direct my own case. Alcott files today, Cole said, before that deputy reaches the ranch. Alcott doesn't have the ledger yet. He files without it. We get it to him after. The filing date is what matters. He was already thinking 3 moves ahead. Do you trust Alcott to know which motions to prioritize? Yes. Then I call him from the ranch right now. He files the consolidation motion and the fraud response today, incomplete if necessary. We supplement next week. He looked at her. Victor's injunction only works if it lands before you have standing as an active plaintiff. Once Alcott files, you're an active plaintiff. The guardianship play becomes dramatically harder. She looked at him. You thought through this scenario. I thought through several scenarios. When, the night you told me about the settlement letter, he held her eyes. I knew then he had a secondary plan. She was quiet for a moment. The wagon was moving fast, Hank pushing the horses harder than usual. Cole, she said. Yes. When this is over. She stopped. Start it again. When this is over, I want to say something to you that I can't say in the middle of it, because in the middle of it, I don't trust myself to say it correctly. He looked at her. The wagon hit a rut and righted itself. Then say it when it's over, he said. She nodded. Once, and held the satchel tighter. They reached the ranch with 40 minutes to spare. Cole was on the telephone to Alcott within 3 minutes of coming through the door. He laid out the situation in under 90 seconds, the injunction the guardianship play the timeline. Alcott said 4 words. I file in an hour. Cole hung up, turned around. Evelyn was standing in the hall with the satchel open, pulling the ledger out, doing the thing she always did, finding the practical action and moving to it immediately. She looked up and handed Cole the ledger across the hallway. Get this to Alcott as fast as you can. I'll have Hank write it directly. It's the original. If anything happens to it, nothing will happen to it. Hank's faster than he looks and more careful than he seems. Cole took the ledger. Go sit down. I don't want to sit down. I know. Do it anyway, for 10 minutes. He looked at her. You've been running for 8 months. You've got 40 minutes before a county deputy knocks on my door with a piece of paper that Alcott is going to make irrelevant before sunset. 10 minutes is not going to cost you anything. She looked at him. Something moved in her face. Then she walked to the sitting room and sat down. Cole stood in the hall, alone for a moment. The ledger was solid and real in his hands. Outside, Hank was already saddling a fresh horse. Victor Hale had spent 8 months building a wall around Evelyn Hart. Document by document, court by court, witness by witness. He'd built it in pieces carefully in 3 different states, counting on the fragments staying separate long enough to close around her. What he hadn't counted on was a blizzard. What he hadn't counted on was a gate opening at midnight and a man who'd been waiting 6 years for a reason to stop being careful. Cole handed the ledger to Hank through the window. Ride fast, he said. Hank rode, and the deputy arrived 38 minutes later to find Cole Mercer standing on his front porch with a telephone message in his hand, confirming that Marcus Alcott had filed in Helena 40 minutes ago, and that Evelyn Hart was no longer a woman who could be petitioned into silence. She was a plaintiff. And the case had just officially begun. The deputy's name was Garrett. He was a decent man, doing a job he'd been handed, and he had the look of someone who already understood he'd arrived too late for the paper in his hand to mean what it was supposed to mean. Cole read the injunction on the porch without inviting Garrett inside. Read it carefully, completely, the way he read every document that came to his door. Then he handed it back. You'll want to contact the Billings filing office, Cole said. Alcott filed in Helena 40 minutes ago. Consolidation motion and fraud response. Mrs. Hart is an active plaintiff as of this morning. Whatever that paper was designed to accomplish, it's behind the timeline now. Garrett looked at the injunction. Looked at Cole. I'm still required to serve it. Serve it then. Come inside. Evelyn was in the sitting room. She stood when Garrett came in and accepted the papers from him with both hands and thanked him by name. Garrett had the expression of a man who had expected this to go differently and was mildly relieved that it hadn't gone badly. He left 5 minutes later. Cole closed the door. Evelyn looked at the injunction in her hands. She read it the way she read everything, completely precisely, not skipping. When she finished, she set it on the table beside the satchel. He named you as a co-respondent, she said. I saw. Victor is claiming you're exerting undue influence over a vulnerable party, that your involvement is motivated by financial interest in the Wyoming property. She kept her voice level. He's trying to make this about you. I know. Cole, Alcott expected this, Cole said. It's in the response he filed. We anticipated the co-respondent move 3 days ago. He sat down across from her. Victor needs to shift the question from whether the deed is real to whether the people defending it can be trusted. If he can get the court focused on my motivations, he buys time and muddies the water. She looked at him. And what are your motivations? Because when that question gets asked in a courtroom, the answer needs to be airtight. My motivation is that I reviewed the documents, found them credible, and have no financial interest in the Wyoming property whatsoever. I have that in writing. Alcott has a signed statement. He paused. My personal feelings are not entered into evidence anywhere. Something moved across her face at that. Fast, then gone. Good, she said. Quietly. Yes, he said, just as quietly. Just as. They looked at each other across the table for one moment that held more than either of them was ready to name. Then Cole picked up his pen and went back to work, and Evelyn pulled her papers close, and the sitting room settled back into the particular charged stillness that had been building between them for days, not ignored, not acted on. Just present the way weather was present before it broke. Alcott called that evening with the first real good news in 8 months. The consolidation motion had been accepted. All 3 of Victor's fragmented filings were now being heard in a single Helena court under Judge Carver, a man Alcott described as meticulous, impatient with procedural games, and deeply unreceptive to cases that appeared to have been manufactured rather than discovered. Carver is going to read Victor's 3 filings side by side, Alcott said over the line, his voice carrying the particular satisfaction of a careful man watching a careful plan start to work. When you read them separately, they look like 3 independent legal actions. When you read them together, the repetitions show. The same witness names in 2 separate filings, the same phrasing in documents that were supposedly produced independently. He built the wall from the same materials and hoped no one would put the pieces next to each other. Cole had the receiver pressed to his ear and was watching Evelyn across the desk where she sat listening to his side of the conversation and reading his face. How long until Carver reviews? Cole asked. He's calendared us for 2 weeks, but he requested the original deed and the county recorder's copy within 3 days of consolidation. That's not standard procedure. That means he's already looking. Alcott paused. Cole, when a judge requests originals before the scheduled review date, he's not waiting for the hearing to form an opinion. He's verifying something. He suspects fraud. I believe he's already confident of it and wants the physical evidence to support what he's seeing on paper. Another pause. Get me the ledger by tomorrow, and I'll have the full evidentiary package ready before his 3-day window closes. Cole looked at Evelyn. Hank's writing it in tonight. Good. One more thing. Alcott's voice changed slightly, a shift in register careful. Victor retained Randall and Cross this morning. Officially. The filing is public record. Cole knew the name. Everyone in Montana's legal and business community knew the name. Randall and Cross out of Denver were the most expensive and most aggressive estate litigation firm west of Chicago. They didn't take cases. They took wars. He's escalating, Cole said. He's scared, Alcott said. Men who are winning don't retain Randall and Cross. Men who can see the floor dropping out from under them do. A beat. Which means he's going to move hard and fast in the next 72 hours. Expect something you haven't anticipated. Cole thanked him and hung up. He looked at Evelyn. Randall and Cross, she said. She'd heard enough. Yes. She absorbed that for 1 second. He's spending more to fight this than the land is worth to him financially. It's not about the land anymore, Cole said. It's about whether he wins. Men like Victor, when they've built their entire identity around the idea that they take what they want, and no one can stop them losing the case, is secondary to the humiliation of being publicly proven wrong. He looked at her steadily. Which means he'll do something that isn't about legal strategy. Something personal. Something designed to damage rather than win. She was quiet. Me, she said. Or me, or both. What are you expecting? I don't know specifically. That's the problem. He stood. But I know the shape of it, and I know who he'll use. He was thinking about something he hadn't told her yet. A name that had been sitting in the back of his mind since Victor left the porch 2 days ago. A connection he'd noticed and filed and hoped was coincidence and had spent 48 hours concluding was not. He said it now. Victor Hale and Clara Whitfield, he said. Her father runs a land development company out of Bozeman. Victor's done 3 deals with him in the last 4 years. He watched Evelyn's face process this. Clara knows things about me, about the ranch, about the years after she left, about what matters to me. He kept his voice even. Victor is not the kind of man who leaves a resource unused. Evelyn looked at him with clear eyes. Has she contacted you? Not yet. But you think she will. I think Victor will send her. He said it flatly, with the specific flatness of a man who has already done the grief and come out the other side into something cooler and more functional. Not because she owes him anything, because he'll make it worth her while, and because he'll tell her just enough of a story to make her believe she's helping rather than being used. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Will it work if she comes? Cole thought about Clara, about the 6 years, about the nursery door at the end of the upper hall that he'd never been able to bring himself to repurpose or open. It would have worked 2 weeks ago, he said. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. The sentence had a weight that didn't require completion, and Evelyn was not a woman who missed weight. She looked at the table. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. None of this is your fault. The Clara part is adjacent to my arrival. The Clara part was always going to be unfinished business, he said. You didn't create it. You just made it necessary to deal with. A pause. That's not the same thing as fault. She looked at him then, really looked, and something in her face opened the way a window opens, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough to let different air in. Cole, she said. Not yet, he said gently. You said when it's over. She held his gaze for one beat. Then she nodded. When it's over. Kakamo. Clara Whitfield arrived on Saturday. Not announced, not through Victor, not through any channel Cole could have blocked or prepared for in the ordinary sense. She arrived the way she'd always moved through the world, assuming access, expecting reception, genuinely surprised when either was withheld. She was still beautiful. That was the first thing Cole registered, followed immediately by the recognition that it didn't hit him the way it once had. She looked like a memory of a feeling familiar in shape, no longer capable of the original effect. Marta brought her to the front sitting room and came to find Cole in the office, with an expression that communicated everything without a word. Cole set down his pen, straightened his jacket, and walked to the sitting room. Clara stood when he came in. Cole. Her voice was warm, practiced warm or genuine warm. He'd spent years unable to tell the difference, and was now for the first time entirely certain which it was. Clara. He did not sit, did not invite her to sit again. Why are you here? She blinked. She'd expected something else, surprise perhaps, or the careful courtesy he'd always shown her, or the residual softness that men carried for women who'd once held their hearts. I heard you were in some difficulty. I wanted. Who told you? A pause. I've been in contact with Victor Hale. About his case against Evelyn Hart. Her composure held, but she shifted. I know there's a dispute. I know you've gotten involved in something complicated. I'm concerned about what it might cost you. Victor sent you, Cole said. Simply, not accusatory, just accurate. He mentioned you by name, yes. He thought you still had influence here. Cole looked at her. You don't. That's not said unkindly. It's just true. He watched her face process it, the small recalibration, the reassessment. What did he offer you? She didn't answer. Clara, what did he offer you? A finder's fee, she said finally, quietly. If I could convince you to step back from your involvement. He said it was a simple business dispute and that you'd been given a one-sided account. Did you believe him? She was quiet for too long. You didn't believe him, Cole said, but you came anyway. The money was... She stopped. I know. He said it without judgment. That was the most honest thing about Clara. She had always been honest about what she wanted, even when what she wanted hurt other people. He'd once thought that was a flaw. Now he understood it was simply who she was. Go back to Bozeman. Tell Victor whatever you need to tell him. But don't come here again." She stood. "Cole, whatever that woman has told you. Her name is Evelyn Hart. She told me the truth. I verified it independently." He looked at Clara steadily. "Victor is going to lose this case. The documents don't support his claim. The witnesses are compromised. And Judge Carver has already requested the originals, which means he's already looking." He paused. "If Victor has told you anything that makes you feel like you're on the winning side of this, he hasn't told you the truth." Clara looked at him for a long moment. Something moved in her face, complicated, unresolved, too mixed to name. "You've changed," she said. "I've been here the whole time," he said. "Come, and I'll have Marta bring your horse." Evelyn was in the hallway. She hadn't been listening deliberately. She'd come downstairs for water and heard enough to know what was happening, and had stood very still and not moved, and not pretended she hadn't heard when Cole came out of the sitting room. He looked at her. She looked at him. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Yes." He said it without hesitation, and it was true. "More all right than I expected to be." She studied his face for a moment. "She's gone. In a few minutes." He walked to the kitchen and poured himself water and stood at the counter. "Victor's out of personal weapons. He used the one he had, and it didn't work. Whatever comes next is going to be purely legal." "That's where we're strongest," Evelyn said. "That's where we're strongest," he agreed. She came into the kitchen and stood across the counter from him. Close enough that the space between them was deliberate on both their parts, maintained not from distance, but from the specific awareness of two people who have been careful with each other and are running out of reasons to stay careful. "The thing you said," she began, "about 2 weeks ago, that it would have worked 2 weeks ago." He looked at her. "I've been thinking about that," she said. "What changed?" He set down the glass. "You know what changed. I want to hear you say it." He looked at her, at the woman who'd shown up at his gate with nothing but her life and the truth, who'd fixed fence posts and made bread and held her satchel like a shield, and fought 8 months alone without once asking the world to feel sorry for her. At the woman who'd said, "I don't want to be the reason you become that," and meant it with every word. "You," he said. "You changed it." She held his eyes. And for the first time since the blizzard, since the gate, since the night she'd pressed her forehead to her horse's face and let one moment be unguarded, she didn't pull it back. "Okay," she said, soft and certain. "Okay." And it wasn't a resolution, they both understood that. The case wasn't over. Victor wasn't done. Randall and Cross were still out there building something. The world outside Blackstone Ridge was still complicated and sharp, and not finished with either of them. But something between them had been said, and it held. The twist that Alcott had warned about came Monday morning, and it was worse than anything Cole had anticipated. Not from Victor. Not from Whitmore. Not from Randall and Cross. It came from inside. One of Cole's ranch hands, a man named Briggs, who had worked Blackstone Ridge for 3 years, and who Cole had trusted with more than most, had given a statement to Victor's lawyers over the weekend. A written, signed affidavit claiming that he had personally witnessed Cole coercing Evelyn Hart into signing documents. That he had heard Cole threaten her. That she had appeared frightened in his presence on multiple occasions. Every word of it was false. Cole read the affidavit at the kitchen table with the particular stillness of a man who has been hit somewhere he didn't think was exposed. He read it twice, set it down. Hank was standing across the table. His face was the color of old ash. "Where is Briggs?" Cole asked. "Gone," Hank said. "Left yesterday, cleared his bunk, took his pay." A pause. "Someone settled his debt at the Dillon Creek Saloon Saturday night. $60. Victor's people were in town Saturday." Cole looked at the affidavit. At Briggs's signature, clumsy, slightly crooked, the signature of a man who didn't write much and wrote less when he was nervous. "He needed the money," Cole said. It wasn't an excuse. It was just the fact laid flat. "He sold you for $60 and a cleared tab," Hank said. The anger in his voice was quiet and therefore genuine. "He sold what Victor needed," Cole said. "A witness inside the ranch. Someone who could say he'd seen something." He looked up. "How does this hit us legally? Alcott needs to know today." "I know. Get him on the phone." Cole stood. He walked to the window. Outside, the ranch was running exactly as it always ran. Cattle-moving men working the machinery of Blackstone Ridge, functioning with the precision he'd spent 12 years building. None of it looked different from the outside. From the outside, it looked exactly like what it was: solid, rooted, real. He thought about Briggs. 3 years of decent work before one bad weekend and $60. The world was full of Briggses, not villains, just people who reached a threshold and chose the wrong side of it. That understanding didn't help much right now, but it was true. Evelyn appeared in the doorway. She'd been at the table for the affidavit reading and hadn't spoken and hadn't left. "Cole," he turned. "This is the thing you didn't anticipate," she said. "Yes. Victor knew you'd protect the external perimeter, the legal filings, the journalists, the contracts. He needed something internal, something that would make the court question the environment I was in, not just the documents I produced." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were working fast. "If the affidavit gets any traction, it shifts the question from whether the deed is real to whether I was under duress when I directed the case. It puts my judgment in question." "Without your judgment, there's no plaintiff," Cole said. "That's the move. Can Alcott kill it? He can challenge it. Briggs has no corroborating witness, no documentation, and a $60 payment from Victor's people the night before he left, which Hank can testify to." Cole picked up the affidavit. "But it takes time, and Randall and Cross know it takes time. That's what they're buying." Evelyn walked to the table and sat down. She put both hands flat on the surface, the gesture she made when she was thinking hardest. "There are 6 other ranch hands who've been here the entire time I have," she said. "Any of them willing to provide counter-affidavits?" Cole looked at Hank. Hank said without hesitation, "All of them." Evelyn looked at Cole. "Then we bury the affidavit under 6 counter-affidavits from men who were there, and we'll say what actually happened. Alcott files them alongside his challenge. Carver sees one man with $60 against 6 men with nothing to gain." She paused. "Briggs just made our case stronger. He gave us a reason to put 6 witnesses in the record." The room was quiet for one moment. Then Hank said, "She's right." "I know she's right," Cole said. He looked at Evelyn across the table. "You did this before. You've had someone sell information on you before." "Yes," she said. "In Wyoming. Victor paid one of my husband's former employees to say he'd seen my husband sign a document unwillingly." She held Cole's eyes. "I learned then that the best response to a false witness is not to attack the witness. It's to surround the lie with so much truth it suffocates." Cole looked at her for a long moment. "Get Alcott," he said to Hank, "and get the men together. I want statements from all 6 of them today." Hank left. Cole sat down across from Evelyn. The table between them was covered in papers, affidavits, and counter-responses and legal filings, and the ongoing architecture of a fight that had been 8 months in the building and was now finally reaching its real center. "We're close," she said. "Very close. Victor is spending everything he has left on Randall and Cross and a $60 witness. That's not the strategy of a man who has options." She looked at the papers. "He's almost out of moves." "Almost," Cole said. "What's left?" He thought about it honestly. "Whitmore. He hasn't moved yet, the direct political move, the contract interference. He's been standing back, letting Victor run the ground game. But if Victor's ground game collapses, Whitmore has to decide whether to step in or step away." He looked at her. "If he steps in, it gets louder before it gets quieter. And if he steps away, then Victor is alone in court with a collapsed witness and a fraud case that Alcott has had 2 weeks to build the response to." Cole straightened the papers. "And we win." Evelyn looked at him across the table, across the papers, across the evidence, across the 8 months of running, and the 10 days of Blackstone Ridge, and everything that had accumulated between them in that time. "We win," she said. "Not a question." the specific voice of a woman who has finally let herself believe it. Cole held her gaze. "Yes," he said. "We win." And for the first time in 8 months, Evelyn Hart let herself exhale all the way down. The 6 counter-affidavits landed on Alcott's desk by Tuesday noon. Every man who'd been on Blackstone Ridge during Evelyn's stay had signed. Davis, who'd eaten her bread and declared her allowed to stay. The 2 young hands she'd coached on the fence post that first morning. The stable hand who'd watched her stand with the gray mare without flinching. 2 others who'd worked alongside her in the yard and seen nothing except a woman who pulled her weight and asked for nothing she hadn't earned. 6 signatures. 6 clean, unambiguous accounts. 6 men with nothing to gain and no debt to settle and no $60 in their pockets. Alcott filed them the same afternoon alongside a formal challenge to Briggs's affidavit, including a sworn statement from Hank documenting the timeline of Victor's people in Dillon Creek, the saloon payment, and Briggs' departure the following morning. The challenge also noted with the precision Alcott applied to everything that Briggs had never once raised a concern about conditions at Blackstone Ridge during his 3 years of employment, had never filed a complaint, and had received his full wages and a positive reference as recently as 6 weeks prior. The lie didn't just collapse. It looked worse than silence. Alcott called Cole that evening with the restrained satisfaction of a man who had been doing this for 30 years and still found genuine pleasure in watching a well-built case function exactly as intended. Carver reviewed the counter filings within 2 hours of submission, he said. His clerk contacted me to confirm we'd be present for the Thursday review. That's not standard. That means he's ready to move. Randall and Cross, Cole asked, filed a motion to delay. Carver denied it in 40 minutes. A pause. Cole, a motion denied in 40 minutes by a sitting judge means he read it, found it without merit, and didn't need to think about it. Randall and Cross don't get their motions denied in 40 minutes. This doesn't happen to them. Good, Cole said. There's something else. I received a call this afternoon from a man named Greer. Said you'd know the name. Cole straightened. Greer. The counter-fraud contact in Billings. The man he'd called 10 days ago and asked to look quietly at the financial trail behind Victor's 3 court filings. What did he find? Cole asked. The funding source for Randall and Cross's retainer, Alcott said carefully. It didn't come from Victor's personal accounts. It came through a shell company incorporated in Nevada 18 months ago, the same shell company that processed payments to the 2 men who signed affidavits claiming to have witnessed your husband change his mind about the will. He let that sit for exactly the right amount of time. One coordinated financial operation, pre-planned, pre-funded, before your husband died, Evelyn. Cole looked across the desk at Evelyn. She was listening to his side of the conversation. She had gone very still. He started building the case before the body was cold, Cole said. Before? Alcott said. The shell company was incorporated 4 months before your husband's death, Evelyn. Victor wasn't reacting to the will. He was preparing for it. Cole relayed it quietly. Evelyn sat with it for a long moment. Her face didn't crumble. It never crumbled, but something in it settled into a deep, cold certainty. The specific expression of a person who has suspected the worst and has now had it confirmed and is deciding exactly what to do with that confirmation. He knew, she said. He knew what the will was going to say before my husband died. Which means your husband told him, Cole said, or Victor found out another way. Her jaw set. My husband was sick for 4 months before he died. He had a doctor. Victor paid that doctor for other things. I found a payment record in the estate files that I couldn't explain at the time. She looked at Cole. He had someone watching, someone reporting. Get that payment record to Alcott tonight, Cole said. She was already reaching for the satchel. Thursday came with the sharp clarity that followed hard weeks. The kind of morning where everything felt like it was either about to resolve or break completely, and the only way to find out which was to walk through it. Cole and Evelyn rode to Helena together. Hank drove. Nobody said much on the road. Evelyn had the satchel on her lap. Cole had a folder of correspondence in his coat pocket. Both of them were thinking through versions of what the next few hours might look like, and both of them knew that thinking through it only got you so far. Alcott met them outside the courthouse on the main steps. He looked at both of them with the steady calm of a man who had reviewed every piece of evidence they had and had arrived at a conclusion he trusted. Judge Carver is going to hear argument on consolidation and preliminary fraud findings this morning, he said. Victor's team will be in the room. Randall and Cross will argue that the consolidated case should be returned to 3 separate jurisdictions. He looked at Evelyn. They'll also renew the mental competency argument, expected to come up indirectly through language about your capacity to manage a complex estate dispute without appropriate support. Let them, Evelyn said. Alcott almost smiled. That's the correct response. He looked at Cole. You're here as a character witness and as a party named in the co-respondent filing. You may be addressed directly. Keep your answers short and factual. I know, Cole said. Cole. Alcott looked at him with something beyond professional. Thank you. For the calls, for Greer, for the 6 affidavits. You built more of this case than you probably realize. Evelyn built this case, Cole said, for 8 months before she ever came to my gate. I just made sure it got in front of the right people. Alcott looked between them, said nothing more on that subject. Let's go inside. John. The courtroom was smaller than the weight of the case deserved. Victor Hale sat at the opposing table in a suit that cost more than most men in Montana, made in a year, flanked by 2 Randall and Cross attorneys, whose stillness had the quality of men accustomed to rooms where the outcome was already arranged. Victor looked at Cole when they came in. Not at Evelyn, at Cole. His expression was the controlled surface of a man calculating whether the situation was still recoverable and not yet certain it wasn't. Then he looked at Evelyn. And something beneath his controlled surface moved not guilt, not shame, but the specific expression of a man confronting the fact that he had underestimated someone he should have taken more seriously. Evelyn looked back at him. Her face was entirely clear. 8 months of running of being called unstable and grieving and vulnerable and manipulable, and she sat down at that table with her satchel in front of her and looked at the man who had done all of it to her with an expression of complete, unshakable steadiness. It lasted 3 seconds. Victor looked away first. Here, Carver was exactly what Alcott had described, a compact, gray-haired man with the impatient precision of someone who had read everything before the session began and was using the hearing to confirm what he already knew rather than to learn it. He opened with the consolidation ruling, which he delivered in 4 sentences. The 3 filings were consolidated. The single jurisdiction was Helena. Any motion to return to separate venues would require grounds he outlined specifically, and which were, to anyone paying attention, grounds that Victor's case did not meet. Randall and Cross's senior attorney stood and argued the venue motion anyway. Carver listened for 3 minutes and denied it in 2 sentences. The Randall and Cross attorney sat back down. Victor leaned sideways and said something to the attorney beside him. The attorney's face stayed neutral, which was itself a tell. Alcott presented the fraud findings next, not as argument, but as document. The shell company, the timeline, the payment to the doctor, the coordinated financial operation that predated Harold Hart's death by 4 months. He laid it out piece by piece with the unhurried confidence of a man who had built the foundation before walking anyone into the room. When he placed the Nevada incorporation documents on Carver's bench, the judge looked at them for a long time without speaking. Then he looked at Victor's table. Counsel, the Nevada entity, are you prepared to explain the funding relationship to the 2 affiant witnesses in this matter? The Randall and Cross attorney stood. Your Honor, the financial arrangements between our client and certain individuals are not relevant to the deed dispute at the center of. I'll determine relevance, Carver said. Not loudly, with the specific quietness of someone who doesn't need volume to communicate finality. Are you prepared to explain it? A pause. We would need additional time to review the documentation. You've had the documentation since Monday morning when Mr. Alcott filed. Carver set the papers down. I'm going to recess for 30 minutes. When we return, I expect either an explanation of the financial relationship or a formal acknowledgement that the affiant testimony in this case is compromised." He stood. 30 minutes. He left. The room was very quiet for one moment. Then Victor leaned hard across the table to his attorneys, and the quiet ended. Washe. Cole was in the hallway outside when Alcott came out 2 minutes into the recess. The attorney looked at Cole with the expression of a man delivering news he had not been certain he'd get to deliver. "One of the Randall and Cross attorneys just requested a private conference with me," Alcott said. Cole felt something tighten in his chest, not fear, but the specific tension of a moment that could go multiple directions. "What kind of conference?" "The kind where opposing counsel asks whether there is a settlement framework under which their client could avoid a formal fraud finding on the record." Alcott kept his voice very level. "Which means Randall and Cross have told Victor what a formal fraud finding means for every other legal action he has pending in 3 states, and he doesn't like the number." "What are they offering?" "I don't know yet. I wanted to tell you before I went in." He looked at Cole steadily. "This is Evelyn's decision. Not mine, not yours. Hers." "I know," Cole said. He went back inside and sat beside Evelyn and told her in a low voice what Alcott had just said. She listened without moving. When he finished, she was quiet for 10 seconds. Exactly 10, he counted them. "No settlement," she said. "Evelyn, no settlement." She turned to look at him. Her eyes were absolutely clear. "He built a shell company 4 months before my husband died. He paid someone to watch my husband in his last weeks. He paid witnesses to lie. He filed in 3 courts to drain my resources. He sent a man after me across 4 states." She held Cole's gaze without blinking. "I did not carry that satchel through a blizzard to settle. I wanted on the record, all of it. His name on a fraud finding in a Helena court, and my husband's deed validated by a judge, and every piece of this in the public record where it cannot be quietly made to disappear." Cole looked at her for a long moment. "All right," he said. He went back into the hall, told Alcott. Alcott nodded once, a single nod that contained something very close to admiration. Then he went to deliver the answer. Carver reconvened, and Randall and Cross did not produce an explanation. What they produced instead was a motion to withdraw from the case. The room absorbed that for a moment. Randall and Cross, the firm that did not lose the firm that had never in its history withdrawn mid-hearing, was walking out. They cited irreconcilable disagreements with their client's instructions. Carver accepted the withdrawal with the same compact brevity he applied to everything. Victor sat alone at his table with one junior attorney who had been on his original team before Randall and Cross arrived, a young man from Billings who looked like he was understanding for the first time exactly what he had attached himself to. Carver looked at Victor directly. "Mr. Hale, do you wish to seek new representation before we continue?" Victor's jaw was tight. "No, Your Honor." "Then we'll proceed." What followed in the next 90 minutes was the orderly, documented, irrefutable dismantling of everything Victor Hale had spent 8 months building. The shell company's funding relationship to the 2 affiants was entered into the record. The doctor's payment record was entered. The competing deed, Victor's supposedly legitimate document, was compared against handwriting analysis Alcott had quietly commissioned 2 weeks prior, which found 3 points of inconsistency with Harold Hart's authenticated signature. The county recorder's copy from Cheyenne, filed the same day as the original, by a different clerk under a different transaction number, was entered. The 3 fragmented filings were read side by side, their identical witness names and repeated phrasing documented as evidence of coordination rather than coincidence, and the original deed, Evelyn's deed, Harold Hart's handwriting. 2 clean witness signatures. The notary, stamped sharp and legible, was placed before Carver as the final exhibit. He looked at it for a long time. "This document," Carver said, "is consistent with every verified element of the record before this court. The competing deed is not." He set it down. I'm prepared to rule. Victor said something to his junior attorney. The attorney put a hand on Victor's arm. Victor sat back. The fraud finding was formal, complete, and on the record. The original deed was validated. The 3 fragmented cases were dismissed with prejudice, meaning Victor could not refile. A referral for criminal investigation of the shell company's activities was noted for the state attorney's office. Carver looked at Evelyn directly before he adjourned. Mrs. Hart, your documentation was meticulous. Your patience under considerable pressure was evident in the record. This court's only regret is that the process took as long as it did. Evelyn said, "Thank you, Your Honor." Her voice was completely steady. Carver adjourned. Victor left without looking at either of them. He walked out of that courtroom with his junior attorney beside him and his shell company on the public record and his father's money spent on a firm that had just walked out the door, and he did not look at Evelyn, did not look at Cole, did not do anything except walk and keep walking until he was gone. Evelyn watched him go. Cole watched her watch him. She didn't look triumphant. She didn't look relieved in the way people looked relieved when a weight was lifted. She looked like someone who had carried something very heavy for a very long time and had just set it down and was standing quietly in the space where it used to be, taking stock of herself. Alcott was speaking to someone across the room. The courtroom was emptying. Cole stood beside Evelyn and said nothing because nothing was what the moment required. After a long time, she said, "He really did start planning before Harold died." "Yes. He sat across from my husband at the dinner table in the last months of his life and smiled and said the right things and was already planning." She said it without drama, just laying it flat, the way she laid everything flat when the truth of it was big enough to need room. Harold deserved better than that. "He did," Cole said. "I think he knew toward the end. He told me about the county recorder's copy like he was telling me a secret he'd been keeping. Like he wanted to make sure I had something no one could take." She paused. "He was trying to protect me from something he didn't say out loud." "He did protect you," Cole said. "That copy was the spine of the whole case." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm going to fix the ranch," she said. "Go back to Wyoming and run it the way it was meant to be run. Hire good people. Keep the land." She turned to look at Cole. "That's what I came out of this with. The thing I was fighting for." "Good," he said. She held his gaze. "And then I'm coming back." The courtroom was nearly empty now. Alcott was shaking hands with someone at the door. Outside, through the high windows, the Montana sky was doing its February best, sharp and enormous, and entirely indifferent to what had just happened in this room. Cole looked at Evelyn. "How long?" "Spring," she said. "I can have the ranch operational by spring. Hire a foreman, get the cattle moving, make sure the wells are running." She looked at him steadily. 3 months, maybe 4. "I'll leave the East Wing room made up," he said. She looked at him with the expression that had no name, the one that was past all the others, past wariness and calculation and careful management, all the way down to the thing underneath that had been there since she'd pressed her forehead to her horse's face in the yard and let one moment be real. "Cole," she said, "the thing I said I'd tell you when it was over. Yes, I have not been safe in 8 months. I have not slept fully in 8 months. I have not trusted a room or a door or another person without running the angles first." She held his eyes. "Blackstone Ridge is the first place in 8 months where I stopped running the angles. Where I woke up, and the first thing I thought wasn't about what came next." He said nothing. "Let her finish. I don't know what that means yet exactly," she said. "I'm not going to put words on it that are bigger than I can stand behind right now. But I want you to know it happened." A pause. "You should know it happened." Cole looked at her for a long moment. At the woman who'd arrived soaked and frozen at his gate and refused to lean on Hank's arm and said, "I'm not here to be your wife with ice in her hair and 2 hands on an iron fence and nothing left except her life and the truth." "I know," he said. "It happened for me too." She held his gaze. And then she did something she almost never did. She let the smile come all the way up. Not the dry, brief flicker she used when something was slightly absurd. Not the careful, almost smile she permitted when warmth got past her guard. The real one. The full one. The smile of a woman who has been through the worst and come out the other side, and is standing in a Helena courtroom in February, looking at a man who opened a gate when he should have kept it shut and changed everything. "Spring," she said. "Spring," he said. "All right." Whitmore's political moves against the grazing contracts never materialized. The senator, faced with his name adjacent to a formal fraud finding and a state attorney referral, made the calculation that self-preservation outweighed whatever he owed Victor Hale. He made no public statement. He simply stopped. The contract interference that Cole had been preparing to fight never arrived. The leverage evaporated because the man holding it decided the cost was too high. Greer from Billings confirmed it informally. 2 weeks later, Whitmore was keeping his distance from anything with Victor's name on it and would continue to do so for the foreseeable future. The senator had enough of his own arrangements. He preferred kept quiet to risk drawing further scrutiny by continuing a fight that had already been publicly lost. Cole received that news on a Thursday afternoon and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. The specific satisfaction of watching a threat simply cease to be a threat. Not because he'd destroyed it. Because it had seen itself clearly and chosen to retreat. He wrote it in a letter to Evelyn that night. Not a long letter. A short one with the facts and one additional line. "The East Wing room is ready when you are." She wrote back in 4 days. The letter was 2 pages more than she'd ever written him in the 3 weeks since she'd gone south to Wyoming. She wrote about the ranch, about the foreman she'd hired, a man named Cord, who had worked her husband's land for 7 years and had stayed on through the legal chaos out of loyalty and stubbornness in roughly equal measure. She wrote about the wells which were running clean, about the cattle which had wintered better than she'd feared, about the school in the nearest town where 3 of her workers' children were enrolled and the 4th who would be starting in spring. She wrote near the end, "I wake up and the first thought is, what needs doing, not what might go wrong. That is a new thing. I wanted you to know it's still true." And then in the last line in handwriting that was slightly less careful than the rest of the letter, the way handwriting got when the writer had stopped editing, "I'm counting the weeks." Cole folded the letter and put it in the desk drawer that he'd never put anything personal in before. Then he went to find Marta and told her they'd have a guest in the East Wing in approximately 10 weeks, and he'd like the room checked and the linens changed. Marta looked at him with the expression she'd been perfecting for 9 years. This time, it wasn't about something he was doing wrong. Spring came to Montana the way it always came. Not gently, not all at once, but in argument with the cold, a day of warmth, followed by a night of frost back and forth until the warmth finally won and the land opened up and everything that had been waiting under the surface came through. Evelyn arrived on a Tuesday, not in a blizzard, not frozen, not gripping an iron gate with nothing left. She came up the road to Blackstone Ridge in the early afternoon on her own horse, the same gray horse that had stood in the east draw through the February storm, well rested and well fed and moving easy. Evelyn sat straight in the saddle with the satchel across her body because some things didn't change, and looked at the ranch the way she'd looked at it the first time, directly, completely, not at the wealth of it, but at the substance. Cole was in the yard. He'd known she was coming, she'd written the day, but knowing and seeing were different things, and he stood in the yard and watched her come through the gate and felt the specific feeling of a man who has been careful for a very long time and has decided finally to stop. She dismounted, handed her horse to the stable hand who came forward, turned. They looked at each other across the yard in the spring light. This man who had locked his heart behind 40,000 acres and 6 years of silence, and this woman who had carried a satchel through a blizzard rather than surrender what was true. "You look different," Cole said. "Better or worse?" "Better," he said. "Considerably." She crossed the yard, stopped in front of him, close enough that the careful distance they'd maintained through those 10 days in February, the deliberate, respectful, charged space of 2 people being honest about what they felt, but not yet ready to do anything about it, was no longer there. "I thought about what you said," she told him. "In Helena, that you'd been waiting for something worth fighting for." "I remember. I've been thinking about it for 3 months." She looked at him directly. "I want you to know that I'm not here because I'm grateful. I'm not here because you helped me win a court case. I'm not here because Blackstone Ridge is the first safe place I've been in 8 months." She held his eyes. "I'm here because of you, specifically. Not the ranch, and not the circumstances, and not what you did, though. All of it matters. You. The person who opened a gate he should have kept shut and wrote a letter to Alcott before anyone asked him to, and told the truth in front of journalists when it was easier to be quiet." A pause. "I want to be here because of that person. If that's something you still want." Cole looked at her, at the woman who had arrived at his gate with nothing and turned out to be everything the house had been missing. "Evelyn," he said. "Yes." "It has always been something I want." She exhaled, slow all the way down. He reached out and took her hand, her right hand, the one that had held the satchel across 4 states and 8 months and 1 Helena courtroom, and held it in both of his. Not dramatically, not with the weight of ceremony, just a man holding a woman's hand in a ranch yard in spring, which was the simplest thing in the world and had taken both of them longer than it should have to arrive at. "Come inside," he said. "Marta made bread." She laughed. The real laugh, the one he'd heard exactly once before in the kitchen with Davis and had been thinking about for 3 months. Of course she did. They walked inside together. The dining table that seated 12 held 2 that evening, and it had never felt smaller, and the house that had been built for a family and sat empty for 6 years was not empty anymore. And the silence that had lived in every room of Blackstone Ridge, the cold, sealed, permanent silence of a man who had decided that choosing meant losing, was gone. Not because anything was perfect, not because the world had become simple. The ranch still needed running. Wyoming still needed tending. There were letters to write and decisions to make, and 2 lives that had been built separately and would need careful, patient work to build together. But the door was open, and Cole Mercer, the cold millionaire cowboy who had rejected every woman who had built a fortress out of land and silence, and the long discipline of not wanting, was no longer alone. He had chosen, finally, completely, with everything he had. And this time what he chose walked through the door and stayed.